I'm sitting here today with a very good friend of mine that I have known about 6 months now, and
Mm.
she is really amazing. I'm Jade Shultz. If you don't know me, I've been part of the Greater Things International community for about, I think, 2 years now, and it grows and it just builds, and so we're just grateful to be a part of it. So, Kate, why don't you just tell us about it yourself?
Hi, I'm Kate. I live in Melbourne, Australia, and I am a wife and a mum of 4 children. Um, I love being part of Greater Things, and we've been part of the Evolve course run by Matt and Trish. So that's how I've got to know beautiful Jade. Um, I am a counsellor, registered counsellor, so I help people with anxiety and all different mental health things from my little office. And I think that's me. I love people, and I I'm known to laugh too loud and drink too much coffee. So that would sum me up.
I love that. I love that. So, today, in kind of preparation for Kate and I meeting, I thought I better have a look at her website and just kind of make sure that I fully, or at least get a glimpse of what it is that she does in her day to day life, aside from being a wife and a mom and a coffee lover. And and what struck me was in her about section or in her bio, just on the home page there, it talked about this non-judgmental aspect of when she is counseling with a person. It's an atmosphere that isn't judgmental, and it's just about being present with the person. And so I also, this is not me on her website, but I scrolled
It's not
down.
it's not you.
Somebody had put a little testimony of their experience with her, and the name was Jade. And I thought, oh, rightly so, God, there we are. And so
No,
we're, yeah.
it's also I love the fact that that jumped out for you.
Yeah, it really did because um, sometimes I need a good smack over the head from God. That's like, like I was telling you that um I had gone out for an errand earlier, and the vehicle that I got behind said Connect was the name of the vehicle. And I'm like, oh, okay, Lord, I see this.
Mm,
And so just kind of really thinking about what it is. What do we do with people? What do we do with any person, Christian,
mm,
pre-Christian? What is it that we're set out to do? And um, one of the things that I had kind of thought of was, if we're all threads, if we are all pieces of a broader a tapestry, then we're meant to be unique threads that come together. You
yeah.
think of like the old quilting bees where several women or men would get together. I don't know necessarily that there were a lot of men that did it, but I'm not a sewer,
Yeah.
but
Mm,
um they brought in fabrics that they had collected, and they stitched them, together to make these beautiful tapestries or quilts.
mm.
And so what does that kind of mean for you to connect in this way?
I am a big fan of being outside of the box. So it's great to have church friends, um, but I find my best conversations are actually with just normal people in the community. Um, and so what that looks like for us is we get involved in sports, and then so mainly through our children, but my husband's a marathon runner, so he's got running friends, and I don't run. That would just be hilarious. I hold the bags and the jumpers, um, but what that means is absorbing ourselves into people's lives. So that is connection. And often that starts with a mutual passion. So you just mentioned, I love that they mentioned the Quilters Club. So at a local community centre, we've got the Knitters Club, and they get together and knit squares to make blankets. And I just think there are so many ways we can connect with our passions. And what that looks like is coming with no filter. Just coming as yourself, which can be scary. I'm very scared of that sometimes. And I used to have such an imposter syndrome of going, I'm not worthy, they're not going to want to like me, I'm not good enough, I'm not talented enough, I'm not nice enough, I'm not whatever enough. And they're all lies. And just absorbing and asking who they are and just being in their presence. I think you can't, when we talk about connection, we have to also talk about presence. And showing up for people. So what that means is remembering what they tell you and following that up next time. It means being physically present. A lot of the time, sometimes you can do it online, but if you're in a sports club or a area of passion for you, like being absorbed in people's lives, and being a source of comfort or a source of support. I've got a beautiful basketball friend who we've grown close just because of my job, and she understands my background has been supporting families with children on the autism spectrum. And so when she received an adult diagnosis, she came, she said, I'm not telling anyone, but I'm going to tell you. And we sat there and she just unpacked that. And often connection is listening without judgment.
Yeah.
And it's finding the gold in people. So for my friend, it was, you were so brave. This is a big thing to be undergoing in your 30s, of finding out how you tick. I love this. This is going to change your life. You are so strong for doing this. You've done 36 years of living without strategies. You're amazing. And opens the door just by listening and connecting.
Wow. Whew. That's good. I love that. Wow. For you to pull out the gold in this person, to commend her. And when you say things, you can tell it's very genuine. It comes from a genuine place. They're not just,
it's not fluff and bubble. I think people can see through that.
Yeah.
And so you have to find genuine gold.
Yeah. And wow, though, like I think that goes with perspective too.
Yeah.
And you can't gain a perspective if you're not being present with the person. And for you to see, wow, you have done life and you've done it without these tools that we have. Well done for you. And for you to see that in people is really, it's powerful, because I think that's what I worked in bars for a long time. And why do bars have more people coming to them on a daily basis than go to, a church meeting or even a, just whatever. We'll just stamp that, kind of put that where that is. But it's because there's they don't find judgment there, because everyone goes and they loosen up from a drink, and then they just talk.
Yeah.
And I find that I think sometimes our religion keeps us like we're gonna get affected by something that somebody else is carrying, and so we kind of shelter ourselves away instead of going and sitting with the one person and just connecting with them.
It's so true. And I think of, again, it's sport related for us because that's where our passions are, but some of my best conversations have not been sitting down. They've been on the boundary line of an oval, having a conversation. And often it's, hey, how's your week been? Like, the thing with connection is it doesn't have to be glossy.
Right.
You don't have to be trained. You just have to care and prepare to be uncomfortable. I think that's the big, when we talk about sorry, I talk with my hands. When we talk about non-judgmental, we also have to talk about not being comfortable, because
Yeah.
people will say things that press our buttons, or they'll disclose things, or they'll tell you things that make, I can't tell you how many counseling sessions where everything inside of me is going, what?
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there going, I can see this is a really hard time for you right now. And so that's where you get uncomfortable whilst getting non-judgmental, because you can't walk into someone's world with those judgmental filters on, going, you're doing what you're doing what?
Right.
And so there's better, I think, connecting with people. It's the art of asking a good question.
Mm.
And it's not the glossy question. They're often, how's your week been? How can I help you? Do you need to talk about that? Let's go for a walk. Or I can see that's really hard.
Mm.
So there's those bridging kind of sentences. And people just take that as an invitation to trust.
Yeah.
So it's pretty, it doesn't have to be glossy. It doesn't have to be fancy. You don't need to do a course on how to communicate. You just need to be present, ask a couple of really good questions, and people will open up.
Yeah. And you had an experience while your kids were running track just recently.
Yeah. So I've got mega talented sporty kids, which is amazing. And I love it because I love seeing them flourish in what they choose to do. It could be anything. Like, I've got a beautiful friend whose young person is into vacuum cleaners. And he's on the spectrum, and I love the fact he loves that.
Yeah.
And so I celebrate that. I celebrate Lego, and I also celebrate sports. Like, so we're at this local track on this. It's on a mountain near me, and I'm walking laps while my daughter's practicing for her races, my son's practicing for rep football, and the other two are just kicking a ball. I've got three boys, one girl. And so they're doing their thing, and I'm walking around this track, and I kid you not, I see this eagle over a valley, and I'm like, that's stunning. Oh my goodness. Camera comes out. I'm taking a photo for our Evolve group chat. Because the words I heard was, soaring comes with ease. Like, it's not a striving thing. So I'm like, okay, radio. So I'm walking around, and I'm obsessed with Australian kookaburras. So if you're not in Australia, look up kookaburras and you'll hear this laugh. They just laugh. And there were two massive ones in the tree, and I'm like, oh, that's amazing. And then I literally saw like 10 different Australian birds all doing their own thing. It was warm in Melbourne yesterday, which was a miracle in itself. And I could feel the warm breeze, and it just felt peaceful. And I'm in a season of transition where I don't quite know what is next, and I've been in this for quite a while, and it can get really stretchy. And I felt the invitation yesterday was to connect with his presence and to be present. And I think that's another part of that word connect is, and it's present with people, but it's also present where he wants us. And I would have missed all of that glorious nature, which was singing over me. Like, it was incredible if I had not grounded myself and been present. And so I think that's also a lesson with people. We miss all of that glorious mess if we're not present.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And it was interesting. So for those that don't know, that are not, so we're in a group, the course that Kate mentioned called the Evolve. And there's some other ladies that are in the group, and we have just had a time, just getting to know each other and knowing stories and being, cheering squad for one another.
The woo girls.
Yeah. And so Kate drops this photo, and what she's just dropped on you all, she drops this into the chat, and you watch as a group of women that are all across the world. We have Canadians and Americans and Australians and some from New Zealand. And so you just watch, and it was like putting out a drop of of something, you know, sweet, and watching all of the butterflies come in and land and just, you know, suckle off of this, and you watch a conversation begin to happen over one person being present in one moment in her life that was then shared with another group.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you it went out further than that, because I personally was like, oh, well, my friend, you know, you know, this encounter, because it's like we all had that one. If you're Christian, you've had that one moment with God, at least one moment, and one encounter changed the direction that your life went.
Yeah.
And we're called to be, you know, his hands and feet. So I heard something one time that said something to the effect of, you may be the only Jesus that somebody meets in their lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's incredibly humbling.
Yeah. What a privilege.
It is a privilege.
And what we do with that.
Yeah.
And I think of the women at the well, or the woman at the well, and that Jesus left the disciples to go and connect with her. And it wasn't judgment. It was blunt.
Yeah.
It was truthful, but it was loving. And he left everyone for that encounter with the one. And I think we all have the one. We all have the one that we can speak into and connect with, but more importantly, listen to, because listening builds trust. And what that looks like for us all is very different. It might be the person serving our groceries, or it might be one of the school mums. It might be someone who we see at sports, or who is behind the scenes doing something and is never noticed. And we can be that one, and we can connect. Like, I think of our beautiful friend Karen, who connected with a tattoo artist. And what did she do? She asked some questions, and she listened non-judgmentally. I think it takes a lot to shock me because of what I hear at work. But there's a difference between not being shocked and not being judgmental. I think everyone has a story, and some of those stories are quite traumatic, or they're quite isolating. And it doesn't take much to scratch that surface with a bit of love and questioning, and build that trust to really build and connect and be present with someone. And just listen to their story. I think sometimes we don't actually have to have the answers. We just have to be there. And it takes the pressure off us too.
Yeah.
Whilst we carry Jesus, we don't have to solve everything.
Yeah.
We just have to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. I think it's definitely, it's important, right? To, you know, the Lord's challenged me from times when I have heard a story, you know, you hear a story about, you know, an assault or something that's happened, and it's a violation to somebody. So it makes you naturally want to respond with, you know, and the Lord's challenged me sometimes, because in my head I have thought, oh, I hope they catch this person and they, you know, just throw the book at them and do away with them. They don't need to. And the Lord said, but what if I told you that that person has a story, that they're still loved by me?
It's really hard, isn't it?
It is hard.
Because I don't think feeling those emotions are a bad thing. We need to
Right.
feel those emotions to work through those emotions.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we become very sterile
Mm.
and untouchable in terms of hardening our heart.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it doesn't mean we can't want justice.
Right.
But I think God's justice is so different to ours.
Yeah.
And it's merciful. And whilst it doesn't, and I think a story like that doesn't take away the damage that's been done, but it doesn't define their whole identity.
Right.
And seeing them as a person, not putting a label on as a criminal, is, I think, part of our growth of going, everyone, we all stuff up. Some people stuff up more than others. But what's my heart position on that?
Yeah.
I mean, we had a tragedy in our community a couple of weeks ago, and what happened was really horrible.
Oh.
And yet the outpouring of love for this person who did the horrible thing to herself, people saw beyond the circumstance to the person. And I think that's our biggest challenge sometimes with connection, is seeing beyond the surface to the person. Yeah. Despite what they've done. And that's, again, let me scaffold that a bit. It's very safe. Boundaries are safe.
Right. Yes.
Boundaries are safe. We all need boundaries. I do a lot of work in my counselling practice on boundaries.
Right.
But our heart position can still be, they're a person with a story.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It doesn't mean that, and we're not talking about like, no one needs to be endangered. You don't need to be putting
No.
Yeah.
And I think what we're talking about is how we build connection with people in our community who are outside of the walls of a safe church, if you like, a safe place where everyone talks surface level. You have an order, 2 fast songs, 2 worship songs, a bit of a meet and greet, sermon, close, done. We spend 10 minutes in the foyer and then we leave.
You spend 10 minutes. Wow.
Wow, I'm just saying, like, just
good for you all that you spend 10 minutes. No.
multiple services or whatever, and then you're like, okay, and we're out, and the next one in, and or whatever it is. And I think it's more than that. It's where can I know my neighbor? Where can I encourage and build connection with people in my world who I wouldn't normally hang out with? That might be within your workplace, within your businesses, within anything really. I mean, I've been mega impressed with my husband, who's quite different to me. He's very introverted, very wise, and he's made friends in the running community. And I find this quite hilarious because he doesn't talk a lot, and yet he's got great friends in the running community. I think once you connect over a passion, walls come down. And so that's our challenge and our privilege, isn't it? And there's so much good. There is so much good when you connect.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I learn so much just from people who are so different from me.
Oh. Yeah, and I need that. And we all need that. We all need each other's uniqueness. And it needs to be celebrated, and it needs to be people need to feel that they're seen and heard and that they're valued. We all need that. It's something that, because we're so valued and seen by our Heavenly Father, but it's something that it's a grace that we get to extend to one another. And I want to know people's stories. I want to know, a lady stopped me earlier. I was getting some ice, and I chew on ice all day. It's a thing. And so I went actually into the convenience store with my water pitcher, and so I could fill it with ice. And she came out and knocked on my window, and she is laughing hysterically. It brought so much joy to me because she
Mm.
said, "Oh, I was just here to get 2 cups of ice, and I felt like I was excessive. And then I see you over here with this tanker, filling up of ice." And we just made that, just that it was a parking lot connection, but
Mm.
it opened up to, I got to hear about, I said, "Well, you must be an ice chewer." And then she started opening up about her kids. She was going to, to a little baseball thing. And so she was getting supplies for that. And then, and yeah, that's just a small glimpse of a thing,
Connection.
but
Mm.
it's a moment. It made
Yeah.
me smile,
Yeah.
and it was just like, how can we keep doing that further?
Oh,
And
it's so important. Yeah,
yeah.
it's so important. And I live in the world's longest lockdown city in the world. And I can tell you the impact of lack of connection has
Mm,
been astronomical, and we are feeling it now. And so it's even more purposeful, if you like, to bring the joy and bring the connection wherever we go, because people are, honestly, some people are relearning that social skill,
oh,
or they feel isolated still. My kids laugh at me all the time if they come food shopping with me and we're buying groceries and the person who's serving is, "Hi, how are you going?" And I'm like, "Hi, how are you?" And they're like, "What are you up to today?" "Oh, we just finished sport. I'm doing some baking. I'm doing this, doing that." And my introverted son, who is the carbon copy of his father, is like, "Mum, why do you have so many chats with people?" And I'm like, "Could you imagine doing that job all day and just someone going, 'Yeah, I'm fine. Fine, thanks,' or
yeah,
not even acknowledging them?" I'm like, it took 5 minutes when scanning all of our groceries to have a little bit of a chat, and they're happier. I'm happier. And it killed some great time and got to learn that they also did whatever sport it was my children do.
yeah.
And they felt valued. And I'm like, can you imagine what it'd be like? Because again, when we talk about connection, we're really tying that to empathy, right?
Mhm.
Of walking in someone else's shoes. And it's such an important lesson that we all have of going, what does that look like for you?
Yeah,
How do I step into that space? Well, often it's by questioning and asking questions and connection through that way with no non-judgment,
yeah, yeah,
because they feel that empathy and or they feel that value and connection just by us showing up.
yeah, yeah. I agree. I think
I have a
that's
story, and it's amazing. I was sitting, and it's amazing because it felt really holy. And I shared this on Matt's podcast a little while ago. Um, I was at football, and one of the volunteers supporting my son's football team came and sat down next to me. And I was, in Australian culture, I was eating a pie at the footy, as you do. It was a ripper. For those who don't know what that means, it's fantastic. And it was freezing hot day, and I'm sitting there on this park bench next to the oval watching them warm up. And this volunteer comes up, and all I said was, "Hey mate, how you going? How's your week been?" And just sat and made eye contact a few times as I'm eating my pie everywhere. Um, but he started unpacking this story because it was just brimming on the surface. He was just waiting for someone to ask,
Yeah.
"How are you?" And it turns out the last 2 years of his life have been trauma filled, absolutely trauma filled, with his teenage son. And I'm sitting there, just my heart is breaking for this person who keeps showing up, even though his son isn't in the team, because he volunteers and that's his connection point.
Yeah.
And we had this conversation about how much mental health challenge his whole family had overcome, and that his son was coming back to the home this week and coming back to education this week, and all these things you've missed out on. And I'm sitting there going, this is a holy conversation, because he poured his heart out. And then through questioning, I got to ask a few more things and just sit and connect with presence. got to encourage him a little bit, and he walked away feeling a lot lighter and feeling seen and heard. As I'm going, what a privilege that was to be invited into their space.
Yeah.
It's not hard. It's not hard.
Yeah.
We can all do that.
Yeah.
And I think it's having our blinkers on, having our vision opened to going, this is more than just attending. Who am I going to connect with? Because it takes it from us to someone else.
Mm. Yeah.
And that's what I see the hands and feet of Jesus being sometimes. It's not the revolutionary stuff. It's the day-to-day little.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is. And you do that very, very well.
I don't do it. So I miss a lot of opportunities like everyone else, but I did a project earlier in the year for a community legal centre. So they hired me to basically find people to tell their stories of overcoming hardship.
Mm.
And people have incredible stories. And I've forever been marked by that, because I would walk past these people in the street and you wouldn't know.
Mm-hmm.
Family violence, gender issues, as in like discrimination, a beautiful older woman who was legally blind, who was sharing how walking the streets is so hard because things are all grey, or they're all one colour, and she can't just determine. People who had women who had set up businesses despite all the barriers. Like, once we scratch the surface and ask a question, the connection is just waiting to be there.
Yeah.
Everyone's got a story. And what I realized was there's so much beauty in just asking. All we did was, can you tell us a bit about yourself? Why are you here? Boom. Story.
Yeah.
And you can't help but be inspired by people's strength, but you don't know that unless you ask.
Yeah.
And connect and sit and listen without judgment.
Yeah. And it's something that you remember. It's
absolutely,
once you make a connection, you remember that person's story. You remember it, and that it reminds me of Joshua and Caleb when they were crossing over, and the Lord told them to stop and put the stones down to be, so that the next generations would come through, and they would ask, why are these stones here? And they would tell them, no, this is where we crossed over.
Yeah.
And it's that we pass on our memories when we tell our stories, and each story has a purpose to it.
Yeah.
And when we pass on our stories, they say that the reason that we, have, we teach history in our schools is because things that happen that don't need to be happening again. If you gloss over these, or if you don't let them come to light or be remembered, then it's doomed to repeat itself.
Yeah.
But by empowering people to be able to share their story just by stopping.
Yeah. Yeah.
And empowering.
I think we underestimate the impact of a moment. You had that moment over ice.
Yeah.
And that probably made that lady feel less bad, that's not a real word, but less visible for getting ice.
Right.
And needing to be an ice cruncher. And you brought a bit of joy to her. And in the mix of a date, we don't know what people go through. We don't know what happens behind closed doors. And so what a privilege it is to bring a bit of joy to ask questions, to say thank you, to express gratitude. And we just don't know the weight on that. We might be someone's confirmation of something without even knowing because we asked a question or we said yes.
Yeah.
Or we brought a bit of joy or whatever it is. Like it kind of comes back to the beautiful analogy of the tapestry, doesn't it? We all play a part. And sometimes that looks really small to some, but that weaving might be big to others.
Yeah. 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 I like that. Well, my friend, I think it's a good time to, as Matt would say, put a pause in.
I love it. We could do this all day.
I know. It's been such a joy to chat with you. You can access Greater Things International just by going to greaterthingsinternational.com. There's a Facebook group, and then Kate also has some information. How do we get a hold of you?
Okay, so for Zoom counselling, if that's your thing and that's what you like, it's kjcounselling.com.au.
Beautiful.
Check out the website. All very friendly and non-judgmental.
Yes, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you, my sweet friend. I've had just a wonderful time chatting with you. So
the feeling is mutual. It's been a joy. It's been a joy. We've asked a lot of questions, haven't we?
Yeah. And we'll do it again. Thank you so much. Love you.
Thank you. Love you. Bye.
Connect with Greater Things International on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, or at greaterthingsinternational.com.